Your worship, we already went off for 6:30.
Okay, we're ready to go. I will ask council to come on screen. And 1, 2, 3. Councillor Gordon, are you able to come on screen? Councillor Parks, you seem to be on screen, but your screen is blacked out for some reason. Can you hear me, Councillor Parks?
I can. I'm not sure what's going on with my screen. I'll continue to try to figure it out.
Okay. With that, I will call the meeting to order. This is a committee of the whole for budget purposes for the Council of Loyalist Township on this Thursday, December the 9th, 2021. There was no closed session prior to the meeting this evening, so we are starting open session for 6:30, and I welcome everyone that's in attendance virtually. Being that this is a virtual meeting, we'll note that it is being recorded and that all rules of procedure, code of conduct, etc., all apply to this meeting as if it were live and in person. I also note that Councillor Townend indicated to me that he was not able to be in attendance tonight due to personal circumstances, but he indicates that he will be reviewing the proceedings and responding accordingly. At this time, we will move forward. Councillor Parks, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll just have to rely on you yelling at me if you need to say anything. So, the adoption of the agenda. We have the agenda before us. It's primarily one very large item, the 2022 proposed operating budget. Okay. Is there anything to add to the agenda for this evening? Seeing nothing to add, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Deputies, so moved, seconded by Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Any comment? And no, I'll call the question. I'll ask all the voting to raise a hand in approval or to yell out.
Yes.
Thank you. There are none opposed. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Calling once, calling twice, seeing none, we'll move forward. We move to staff reports. Item 4.1 is the 2022 proposed operating budget. And I believe we have a number of staff going to speak to us this evening. Are we starting with you, Mr. Silver? We're starting with Mr. Dickey.
Hi there. I'll through you, sir. If you're ready, I have the big job of just introducing the presentation agenda. So, yeah. So welcome, council, staff, and members of the public. Just here to kind of set the tone and set the agenda for this evening. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge really the heavy involvement of all the staff departments, all the leaders and members of departments. It really is a team effort to pull this document together and these plans together. And so I'd like to thank all of them. Also, just want to acknowledge that, and you'll see the theme throughout tonight, that staff have really tried hard to follow the direction from council that's really been given to us. It's a culmination of direction. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not things we just started looking at this year. The kind of a culmination of direction given over time through the strategic plan and through direction from council motions over time. So you'll see we've really worked hard to make sure that this document reflects the wishes of councils, which of course have arisen through much consultation and direction from the community, from their needs, from their engagement, and for just making this as good a community as we can. So just wanted to kind of acknowledge those things up front. For tonight's presentations, I don't know, Phil's going to share the screen. So I think just looking at the agenda for tonight, we will start off with some remarks and context from the CAO. And after that, the Deputy Treasurer will be doing kind of a general review, kind of a corporate view, bird's eye view of the whole plan, kind of rolled up, what it means for tax rates. After that, each of the directors will present the budgets from their own departments, and then back to the deputy treasurer at the end for kind of next steps and to I guess take any final questions or directions. So I think Phil will be kind of emceeing it the way through, and I don't know, Phil, whether there'll be questions at the end of each presentation as we go through. But I'll let you kind of coordinate that as we start into the departmental presentations.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah. So just CAO is going to start us off.
So we shall welcome Mr. Silver. The very Christmassy background.
Yes, a very Christmassy background. Good evening. Yeah. Yeah, I would echo Mr. Dickey's comments, but I especially like to thank Phil and Brianne, who have brought this together for us. They've been working on it very hard for several weeks now, and I think because it's the earliest I think that we've met with budget. And I also want to thank and acknowledge Trevor and his team, but I think it's just him, for the public input process and the data that he's created as part of this document. That is new this year too, and we'll speak to that in a little bit. So my first slide, just wanted to talk about the 2021 budget before we move to 2022. We're projecting a healthy surplus this year. Of course, we won't know until it is audited, but we are forecasting a large surplus. And we can attribute that mostly to a delay in the hiring of approved positions and also staff vacancies. It's been very difficult to find and retain staff during this COVID pandemic. Everyone, I believe, is facing that, from private business to municipalities. We delayed the hiring of staff just to manage the cash flow during the pandemic. We sort of backloaded those positions to this fall, and all of them have been filled now. So we won't be repeating this strategy in 2022, and I'll just talk about that in the next couple of slides, why we won't have the ability to do that. And council certainly can decide how much from reserve should be brought into the 2022 budget. We do have a recommendation here, but all of the what you see before you tonight is draft. Council has, of course, the final say on any of this information. Next slide, Phil, please. So our 5 strategic priorities are woven through the budget, and just to review quickly, that's a financial strategy, the commercial and industrial activity, the external communication, infrastructure, and operational excellence. Next slide, please. So drilling down on those 5 priorities, we have made headway with communications. For a couple examples there, this budget is one. Lots of great public input. And also our new website as well. We've moved forward with some e-payments, bag tags, dog tags, and with more to come. Now, I believe there's something on Facebook with a bit of problem today with one of the e-payments, but that has been taken care of. We have made progress with customer service. We have a complaint tracking system now through the website. It's just been launched at the first of the month, and we look forward to providing council with reports regarding the timing, some valuable information when complaints are closed or issues have been addressed. So council can look forward to that in 2022. Budgeting and forecasting, we're doing this earlier, and we're forecasting longer, which were priorities of council. And we're also installing new financial software as well, so the budget may look a bit different in 2023. Asset management, we continue to be a municipal leader with a dedicated resource to asset management. In the shifting of the tax burden, we've made great strides here. That would include the sale of industrial and commercial property. In fact, we've sold $800,000 in the Loyalist East Business Park this year, and 1.5 million in industrial property this year. So council's goal was to shift from residential to the other assessment classes. So we are doing a very good job at doing that. And of course, council approves all of those sales as they go forward. Council had another priority of employer of choice. We are practicing employee engagement, and we have revamped our onboarding program for the new employees, and we're communicating more frequently with employees, and that seems to be going well. And the climate action plan, is woven through this budget. And in fact, fleet management will be something that we'll be concentrating in future years. And we are expecting delivery of a new electric Zamboni soon. So that is that'll be the first part of our fleet that's gone electric. And we will be doing a full strategic dashboard report at a committee of the whole in the new year. So this is just a glimpse of what we've been doing, but I'm very proud of the team that we have and the staff who are working diligently to meet council's expectations. Next slide, please, Phil. So the building blocks for the budget, council gave us a directive of 2%. So this budget is proposing 1.7%. I hate to jump to the end, but I'm sure council has read it, so they've already discovered that it's 1.7%. Public input, again, council, last year, public input was important. We've made it even more important this year. Lots of great, excellent responses, and they will be used beyond this document. We'll be looking at those during our service delivery review as well. Lots of great suggestions from the public on how we can improve service. So I had asked the directors that there would be no new staff in this budget. There were a couple of positions that were pre-approved this year, but there is no new staff in 2022. In September, the consumer price index was 2.8%, and the policy, that council's policy, is that the salary increases for non-union and council is tied to the CPI of September, and that's the average CPI. It's not the higher CPI. I asked staff, the non-union staff, to consider 2% for non-union, as our two QP contract and OPSU contracts call for 2% this year as well. So council may want to have a discussion around that because it does affect council as well. So we've included 2% salary increase in this draft. Now, I just want to stop there and just thank staff for that, because I don't know of too many municipalities where staff would willingly do this. We're in this together. We're certainly a team. That's their feeling. So I thank them for that, and it certainly is an important partnership as we move forward. We're also encouraging departmental sharing of staff, equipment, and resources, and breaking down the silos, the traditional silos amongst the department. We have some very talented staff, and now they're working between the lines of the service departments. And we're still focused on our service delivery review efficiencies. So that is very fluid. We're under constant review. For example, when a position becomes vacant, it doesn't matter what type of position that is, it is reviewed and not automatically filled. If we can work smarter and more efficiently, we will certainly do that as we move forward. Next slide, please, Phil. Okay, having said all of that, we do face a number of challenges in this draft budget. As like every other business, equipment parts and cost shortages, specifically around electronic chips, and also the supply bottleneck that everyone's experienced is taking longer, and the prices have shot up. And as I mentioned before, staff shortages, it's great on the financial side of things, but it does create a challenge for providing the services that council and the taxpayers expect. So it's a challenge meeting that when we're short of staff. Our insurance alone has increased 17%. Fuel prices, if you look where those were a year ago to where they are today, dramatic increase. And there's no indication that it's going to go lower, only higher. We've added new programs, and they're doing a great job. Heritage, Culture, and Tourism, finally being able to give some attention to our very valuable heritage buildings and creating branding around that. So it's challenging to create new programs within a very limited budget. Also, COVID-19 operating expenses continue as they have almost for 2 years now. Not only personal protection equipment, but also the time that we're continuing to spend on COVID and emergency administration. We would be spending certainly on other things if we had a choice. And the delay of the provincial reassessment. Now, the housing market, we all know what's gone on there this year. So no longer are the assessments market value assessment. Now it should be a wash in the end when the MPAC does begin reassessing, but it's certainly, it will in the future, I think, be more of a challenge than it may be today. Next slide, please, Phil. So I've talked to some members of council about comparisons with other municipalities this year, because we've all heard Loyalist is on the higher end, but we do have slides with comparisons that would indicate that. And certainly comparison is a very valid exercise to compare with other municipalities. But in the end, we have to put it in the right context. I'd ask you to do that. So accounting of expenses in the financial information returns, there's a large leeway where municipalities can actually record their expenses. We have to take a look at what services are being provided. Do the comparative municipalities have a pool? Like you're going to see Brockville, you're going to see Smith Falls. Both of those municipalities do not have a pool. Napanee does not have a pool. The number of kilometers of roads, are they paved or are they graveled? It's much easier to maintain paved roads than graveled roads. The number of kilometers of sidewalks, do those municipalities have sidewalks? And in-house services, we're very fortunate to do a lot of our planning and engineering in-house. Some municipalities consult that all out, including Napanee. And we need to take a look at service levels. Loyalist is quite proud of the level of services that we provide, particularly when it comes to road maintenance, winter road maintenance, and especially towards recreation. And currently, we're subsidizing the pool and the arena by $1.5 million. That's a lot of money. So if we want to reduce our tax rates, we need to take a look at our service levels, especially. Our revenue, now I won't go off on the Ontario Municipal Provincial Partnership Fund, as I did last year, if any of you recall that, but it's still very relevant, and we haven't won that fight, but we're continuing that fight in 2022. So as a comparator, the town of Greater Napanee receives $1 million more than we do in OMPF funding, and Napanee is quite similar to Loyalist. Just think of what we could do with that extra $1 million. Our operating budget would be going down by $500,000, not going up by $500,000. That's just to put it in simple terms. And our economies of scale. So what are the number of multi-residential assessments that other municipalities have? We have very little. The the amount of commercial and industrial assessment, as I spoke, we are addressing that, but many of municipalities have much more commercial. And again, I hate to keep using Napanee example, but if you take a look at what's there as far as commercial assessment to what we have, it's not really a fair comparison. And that's why residential tax rate is paying the burden of our operating budget. And we also have to take a look at the number of users to ensure that we have economies of scale. Just, you know, if we take a look at, this isn't part of water and sewer, but we run 2 complete water plants, 2 complete sewer plants. What are the other municipalities running? And in all likelihood, they're running 1. So we run 2 under the same regulations. So your costs are going to go higher. So as I say, it's a valid comparison because taxes can be a barrier to development. Now that doesn't seem to be happening here. We have 6 very active subdivision files, plus a number of historical planning files as well. I talked about the sale of land. We seem to be very attractive to developers right at the moment. But property taxes are regressive. They do not take into account the ability of the ratepayer to pay. And certainly the longtime residents are of concern for staff and the affordability to be able for them to stay in their homes. So we realize that. And so we do have a slide prepared on using the same database that AMO uses to compare with other municipalities. So you'll see that in a little bit. Next slide, Phil, please. Okay. So we have a nice problem. I've been talking a bit about it. Loyalist is the fastest growing municipalities in Eastern Ontario. The county did a study and they proved this. And Mr. Paul presented that study at a council meeting not that long ago. So, but with that growth comes other pressures, public service expectations. So if people are coming from Toronto or from other urban areas, they're expecting the same service levels that they received in those urban areas. So with increased population comes staffing pressure to be increased as well, because we are looking after more roads. I've got road maintenance here as well. Our kilometers of roads are increasing. Our kilometers of sidewalk are increasing. The number of parks are increasing with these new developments that we're attracting. We have more traffic on our road as well. Our energy costs are going up as well, as I spoke about. So the climate action plan will hopefully help us to address some of that. Park maintenance, I covered, and our building and planning approval pressure. The mayor and I have met with developers several times this year to talk about the length of time it takes to have a complete application approved. So we are constantly, staff are working to constantly improve that approval timeline. However, there are a number of factors around the approval, but that is a goal to improve that. And I'm quite proud of what MJ and her department are doing to address those things. But it is another pressure that we may not normally have because we are growing at such a great rate. So if the council wants to lower the tax rate, we need to review service levels and the associated costs with that, as I had said previously. So our operating budget is up 3%, but the net effect is 1.7%. Next slide, Phil, please. So this is my last slide. So we're just talking about operating budget tonight. Capital budget will start at the end of January, I think at the beginning of February. So this is the staff presentation and questions and answers tonight. We hope to get through it all tonight. Then we will review the discussion of the budget items at the committee of the whole tonight and at a future meeting if needed. We'll make the amendments as required. And then the recommendation of the committee of the whole and the budget will be again presented for comment, public comment before approved by council. Okay, so that those are my slides. I think I'm doing a slide on external agencies later on, but I'd be glad to take any questions, Mayor, if anyone.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Silver at this time? Councillor Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to question the 1.5 million, excuse me, I guess the deficit that lost at the arena and the pool, is that more this year because of COVID? Because we're not renting it out as much, or we're not, I mean, is it COVID related that seems a phenomenal amount?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a large amount for sure. And our user fees are back to where they were pre-COVID. Pools are always a money pit. I've worked in municipalities where there are pools, so it's not unique to Loyalist. And as you know, our pool is aging, and in fact, it's closed right at the moment because of a flood today. So those costs create additional operating pressures on us. And as well, we have aging infrastructure in that building, and we could do a better job. As you know, in our proposed hub, we would be capturing the heat generated from the ice machines, from the ice making machines to heat some of the buildings. So there are ways that we can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the building, but it is an old building, and with that comes increasing costs with every year that it ages. So the revenues are about the same, but our costs are increasing.
Councillor Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, and the percentage is so if it's 1.5 million combined, what is it? What is the pool individually?
I will let we'll have to get back to you on that, Councillor Gordon. I don't, Mrs. McFarland may know, so I'll ask her when that comes.
I see that Mr. Renier just popped in. If he's able to provide that answer.
I can't see Phil. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. We'd have to get back to specifically on the pool, but the WJ, like the pool arena, is about 800,000 on its own, but that doesn't include some recreation overhead for some staffing. So when you add that in, that builds the number back up. But we can certainly get you a pool specific number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Parks, I can't see you, but I'm assuming you'll yell out if you do have one.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to address a couple points from Mr. Silver's presentation. He made reference to the pools, or the pool grant application that we have in place right now, and he also made reference to the OMPF. Both of which are federal issues, and I actually had a brief telephone conversation with our new MP yesterday, and we're looking forward to having a more detailed meeting and an opportunity to present these issues to her, find out what the status of that grant application is. She's already having her staff kind of chase that down, and it'll give us an opportunity to speak to her about the OMPF. Being a new MP, I mean, we spoke to the previous MP about it, but he got otherwise occupied, I guess. And I'm confident that our new MP will be chasing that one on our behalf. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Silver? Oh, Mr. Renier has his hand up.
All right, sorry to interrupt. For Councillor Gordon's question around the pool. So the pool specific, not including general overhead, is just under $400,000. But I do want to just say, with the pool in the arena and WJ, it gets a little muddled in the sense of some utilities costs are shared as a facility and we allocate. So like there's one water meter, for example, for the building, but pool itself without overhead is $400,000.
Okay, Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Silver then? Okay. Then I'll say thank you, and
Mr.
are we
Renier.
going to? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Renier, go ahead.
All right, well, you get to listen to me now. So before we get into the general department budgets, we did want to touch just on the budget engagement again this year. Mr. Silver did mention that it really was an emphasis of ours this year, especially based on last year's experience. We want to be a lot more proactive in trying to engage with the community for their feedback. So if you remember on our last regular council meeting in November 22nd, there was a report that provided a summary of the budget engagement initiatives we did this year. This is a picture of one of the roadside billboards we had out, changed them a couple times. I'm sure we all seen them driving around the community. We did that. We also did do a direct mailer to all the residents that had information. We created a dedicated budget webpage this year that had some really helpful information and educational stuff on it. And then through Trevor, as Mr. Silver spoke earlier, did a lot of social media posts, whether through Facebook or the township Twitter, to get the information out. And this is something that we just want to emphasize that will continue to grow, and we're always looking for new ways to engage the public around the budget process. So before we go on, I did just want to highlight the budget survey that was a big part of the engagement this year. So overall, the survey closed on November 30th, and we received just under 400 responses to the survey, which was great feedback. And this is just a high level of some of the survey results. For example, so about 58%, this was a question around helping the township bounce back from COVID. 58% chose that Loyalists resume full services as soon as possible. And you could see that this fall with the recreation service, with the arena reopening and offering pool programs and things of that nature. Some other important survey results, 95% of respondents either want tax increases to be capped at or below inflation or to even decrease. And I think you can see with the budget presented this year that coming in at 1.7% is definitely well below inflation. As we all know, inflation at this time is much higher than 1.7%. So we had some other questions around the balance of user fees and tax rates, and 50 to 60%, depending on which area, would support an increase in user fees if it helped to minimize tax increases. And council will see that during 2022, we are doing an internal building study rate report, which will be coming. And I also know the recreation department is currently undergoing a thorough review of their fee structures. So we do hear these things, and we are working on those. Many comments we receive, which won't be a surprise to anyone, is around garbage bag tags. And that was definitely came through in the survey that about 80% do not support an increase in garbage bag tag rates. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anyone. And there is no proposed rate increase on the garbage bag tags. We did also just want to mention a comment we get a lot through the survey is that it's not tied to the general rate tax levy, but water and sewer rates being high. And as council knows, at the last committee of the whole, and it's coming on December 13th, council approved to hold the rates flat for next year. Both the flat fee and the consumption charges are remaining flat. So we do hear this, and we do work the best we can to achieve these things. And then just the last two ones I want to highlight there is that only 11% responded that they have a good understanding of how our budget process works, and 21% said they're familiar with the services and programs the township provides. And the CAO touched on this earlier, but that really indicates an opportunity as staff and council to continue educating, continue engaging, and that just really highlights it. And we do see that as an opportunity to continue with that initiative. So with that, I'm going to go into the general budget overview. Were there any questions around the budget engagement, or would you like me to just get started?
Any members of council have questions with regard to that budget engagement or some of the surveys, et cetera? And at this time, I don't think I can see Councillor Parks. Just want to make sure she's still with us.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. The way my screen is, I can only see the people with video. So.
All right, well, so I'm just going to provide a general budget overview prior to getting to the departments. When we get to the departments, the directors will be speaking on each of their individual departments. So overall, as the Mr. Silver mentioned, we are proposing a 1.7% overall tax rate increase. This is a 1.8 or a 1.75 township rate increase. So that 1.7 right now is based on an estimate or an assumption that the county would be at 2% and the education would be flat. To date, we have not received indication from the county. Just want to make that clear. So that is an estimate. So the levy requirement's about 18.6 million, and that's an increase of just under $600,000 over last year. And like Mr. Silver said, that's a 3% increase. And part of that 18.6 includes 631,000 in debt repayments. We did not issue or take out any new debt in 2021. And that was mainly due to timing of some capital projects, which we'll discuss at the end of January. And out of that 631,000, that does include 148,000 in interest, just in case anyone was wondering. The 6,600 net reserves, so that's the net reserves after money we put in the reserves, and we're also, I'll speak to it later, we're proposing to use reserves quite a bit in this budget. So that's the net impact. I would say that the main contributions to reserves, and this is on page 10 of the budget binder for those that are following. There is, we still have the $250,000 general contribution to capital reserve, which we started a few years ago, initially for a municipal office and then the community hub. So we have continued that to build that reserve up, and that would also include a $425,000 transfer to the fleet reserve, which is a 2% increase over last year's, amongst some other things. And then the general levy does include about 2.4 million in contribution to capital this year. And that's a 2% increase over last year's contribution to capital. Next slide. So this next slide is, as you can see there, like last year, we have a reference to the tab and the page number for those who are following in the binder. But this just shows the last 4-year summary of the tax rates and the levies, which does coincide with this council's 4 budgets of this term. So if you look at it, there again, you see it's a just under $600,000 increased levy requirement. 272,000 of that comes from growth assessment on new development. So that's new houses coming online. We had overall about a 1.6% increase over our assessment from last year. The other 320,000 of that levy is a direct result of us increasing the tax rate. So that's what that breakdown means. And if you can see over the 4 years, the township has averaged the 3.2% township rate. But that's a 1.9% overall rate increase over these last 4 years. And I do just want to mention that it's important to realize too that in 2021 and 2022, we have had that freeze and MPAC assessment, which has definitely put a pressure on the tax rate without that phase-in assessment on its existing properties. So to maintain under 2% over the 4 years, and with the inflation now, I would say it's a good achievement. CAO mentioned this earlier and talking about comparing with other municipalities. So there's a whole lot of municipalities on here. This would be the overall tax rate. So for loyalists, that means our rate, the county rate, and the education rate. An upper tier would just be their rate, but this is the overall. Loyalists is the red line. We tried to pick municipalities in our immediate area or other ones that share similar makeup, i.e. populations, things of that nature. So you can see where we are there. I do just want to take this time because another question we get a lot, or a lot of feedback we get, is just to make sure it's clear that the general rate levy and the tax rate, what does it pay for? One thing we get a lot is it does not fund the ferry services. Just want to make that clear. That is funded through provincial, and Lori, Ms. McFarland will speak to that later. That comes from provincial subsidy and passenger fares. It also doesn't, the general rate tax rate does not fund water and wastewater. That is through user fees, which are, like I mentioned earlier, council approved the other week. So just understanding exactly where the tax rate is going, but people can look there, but it's always interesting to compare. The next thing I just wanted to touch on is that I know everyone focuses very much on the tax rate for obvious reasons, but the general equation for the average resident is it's really your assessment times the tax rate equals your taxes owing. And as we know, assessment comes through MPAC. And I just want to bring that up from a township perspective. It's really assessment and the tax rate equals our levy requirement. So it's just the focus on the levy requirement is our net expenditures. So instead of just always focusing on the tax rate, really focus on that levy requirement and where we're spending the money. And that will result. The tax rate is really a byproduct of the assessment and the levy requirement. So don't just key in quite on the tax rate. And I did just want to mention on the Budget 101 on our webpage, there is a great link through MPAC for anybody that may be watching, just for their own educational purposes, that explains how your tax bill is, how your tax levy comes to be. And it's just a great resource if anyone would like to do that. So we just wanted to highlight that. And then this kind of feeds into like the assessment, where, as Mr. Silver mentioned, is the diversification of the assessment base. So we know in Loyalist traditionally, we're about 90% residential, which does put a big tax burden on the residential. As he mentioned, we're working hard and there has been a lot of developments in the business park and industrial park. And it is really important to diversify that. And going forward, that is definitely something we're working towards. So this one, there's a lot going on in this one. So one side shows, so the average single detached family home in Loyalist Township is assessed at $257,000. So based on that, the Loyalist portion of your bill next year on that average house would be $2,086, which is $174 a month or $5.72 a day. So the pie chart on the left there shows, breaks it down kind of by department. So for example, 5% goes to business services, 10% to emergency, 13% to external, which would be the OPP. So it just breaks it down that way. On the other side, it breaks it down by expenditure. So you can see that, for example, our operating levy, 10% goes towards capital, 45% to salary, wages, and benefits, which is our largest expense. And if you look on page 7 on tab 2 in the binder, just talks about, so overall the increase would be $36 for the average assessment over last year for the township portion of the bill, or $3 a month. So that's what that tax rate increase amounts to. So I'm not going to get too much into it here, but this is just the budget broken down by department. Each department director will speak more to these when their slides come. But just overall, again, it's a 593% levy increase over last year, which is 3% for the 1% tax. And like I said, each director will speak in more detail regarding these. So the purpose of this slide is we want to really illustrate where that $593,000 change in levy comes from. So to do that, we kind of exclude all the one-time expenses or things that are funded through like a reserve fund transfer, for example. So it's not necessarily impacting the change in the net change in the levy. So as you can see, the majority, a lot of these net out, but the majority obviously comes from a change in net salaries and benefits of about $590,000 when you normalize it that way. And if you look on page 15 under tab 3 of the binder, has a more detailed explanation on the change in salaries and benefits. But I would just highlight the main changes there are, there's no new staffing proposed in this, but there are 2 new FTEs this year over last year's budget. As Mr. Silver mentioned, they were pre-approved. So that obviously adds to it, bit of the budget. The other impact on salary and budget, you'll see obviously the CPI increases, the collective agreement increases, step increases for staff. But we also approved a number of new positions last year, and to come in at the budget number we did last year, a lot of those positions would have been budgeted to start in July or halfway through the year. Well, those positions are filled now, so now they are coming in this year for the full year. So we do feel that impact, and I'll speak to that a bit more when I talk about how we're using reserve funds to come in at under 2%. And just the other thing with staffing I'd like to note is our benefits have increased about 6%. So that's like dental, extended health. Those have gone up 6%, and we have experienced quite an increase in those over the last number of years. So before I end the general overview, we did just want to talk about general reserve withdrawals. So you'll see there, it's just under $1 million. So if you remember back in March of this year, Council approved an operating surplus and deficit management policy. And we also had a updated reserve and reserve fund policy. And the goals around that was really to leverage and grow reserve funds going forward. And a big part of that was tax rate stabilization reserves. So I just wanted to highlight some of the reserve stabilization and other reserves that we are utilizing this year that allows us to come in at that 1.7. So a big one, as we mentioned a few times, is that this is 2022 will be the second year of the MPAC assessment freeze. So we are proposing to bring in $250,000 from our stabilization reserve to help with that impact, because it is the second year in a row. We didn't do it last year, but though that freeze really does impact the tax rate. So that is meant to kind of offset part of that that freezing. We do have just under 290,000 in temporary staffing coming from reserve. So these we do have some positions that we would term COVID temporary staffing positions, mainly around public works and winter control, to ensure that we have adequate staffing for things like winter control, clearing the roads. God forbid if we had staff go down with COVID. So those are funded through reserve, so they do not impact the tax levy. As I mentioned earlier about the new positions that were approved in 2021. So for this year, to kind of phase that in over 2 years, that impact of them being in here for the full year, we are proposing to phase in that full year impact by 50%. So what that means, that 111,000 is the full year impact of those new positions is really about $250,000. We're bringing in 50% to cover that through the stabilization to phase it in, and then by 2023 they'll be fully in the levy, and that was just to smooth out the tax rate impact of that. And then there you can see some other big one-time studies and things like soil testing study, some asset management studies, some planning consultant, utilizing that stabilization reserve. And I just want to highlight the election costs. So we have an election reserve. So in non-election years, we contribute to the reserve. And then in the election year, which will be 2022, which I'm sure everyone here knows, we do pull out of that reserve. So that way you don't have that spike every 4 years when we have an election. Just to demonstrate how we are utilizing reserves the best we can to minimize the impact on the tax rate. That's it for the general overview. Before I move on, were there any questions before we get to the departments?
Council, do we have any questions with regard to what Mr. Reniers has provided today? Seeing nothing, I actually have at least one, the notes I've taken. Phil, you mentioned a couple times the staff benefits, and I believe they went up 6% this year. If I recall correctly, they also went up significantly last year. Just for clarity, just make sure that I know and everyone knows, is this not reflective of, I'll say, an increase to the benefits that we're providing to our staff? It's a reflection of an increase in cost to the existing benefits. So it's not like we've upped their dental or anything like that in the process. It's just it costs more to provide those now.
Yeah, so last year they went up 8%. So you're correct in your thinking there. And that just reflects so we are part of the group that goes out and tries to secure the best rates. But yeah, we haven't increased our benefits. It's the cost of the benefits we provide. And that's mainly being fueled. Last year was a lot by dental. And then also drug costs. There's a lot of expensive drug costs, and like all insurance and benefits, those eventually filter down and get reflected into the premiums they charge us. But yeah, no, we have not expanded the benefits coverage. It just costs more for that existing coverage.
Okay, thank you. It's just similar to the insurance costs that keep on going up as well.
Exactly.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Renier on the stuff that he's provided? I'm seeing no hands. I'm not hearing Councillor Parks yell. So I guess we'll move forward, Mr. Renier.
Okay, you got me for one more section, and then
okay,
you'll be done with me. Before we get to the departments, I'm just going to speak to non-departmental, which is kind of like its own department. So For those following in the binder, we're kind of moving to tab 3 now. Just going to go through it. So this is, and each, as I mentioned, each director will speak to their departments. So a couple of years ago, we started moving a lot of some higher level things to what we call non-departmental. And if everyone remembers, the reason for that is we moved things like debt there, capital contributions, reserve funds. The idea was to make the individual departments their budgets more reflective of their actual day-to-day operations. Just as a reminder, so for example, in non-departmental, that's where we flow property taxes through, capital contribution, reserve funds, debt, and a few other miscellaneous things. So overall, non-departmental budget this year is down about 9% or 150,000. It's about 1.7 million, whereas last year was just over 1.8. And I'll speak to that change coming up in the next couple of slides. So before I really get into it, we call these the bubbles this year. And if you're looking in your binders, you might have noticed these colorful bubbles. So thought I'd just take a time because there has been some confusion around the bubbles. So the idea of the bubbles was just to take it as an opportunity to highlight either expenditures or revenues that are built into the budget, but aren't necessarily a key new initiative or haven't had a material change. So otherwise you may not know that they're in there, but it's kind of just to highlight that. And for example, you might see in the bubble, for example, here we have $474,000 in OMPF. And then under key changes, it does mention like OMPF's up $8,000. So I hope it's clear. If there's any questions on it, please let me know. But we did just want to take this as an opportunity throughout the departments, just as a way to remind council and anyone who may be watching as well, just what does make up these department budgets, not just the changes year to year, because there are a lot of important things in there. So as you can see in non-departmental, we're not going to talk about OMPF too much, but we do get about $475,000 a year. Non-departmental is where we include things like tax write-offs, whether from PIL or the township, supplementary taxes. We have a contribution to the fleet reserve, contribution to capital, things of that nature. And the main reason why the net departmental operating budget is down $150,000 this year, the majority of it is due to, this is in non-departmental is where we bring in that $250,000 in reserves for that impact freeze assessments recognized in this budget. And that's kind of netted off against the increase in contribution to capital and fleet. And I did just want to highlight, we are projecting about $15,000 less next year in our deposit interest on our bank account. As we all know, deposit interest rates are are very low. So anyone wondering, our current deposit interest rate on our bank accounts is 0.65%, which is well below what we're used to experiencing in the last few years. So that's really it for non-departmental. Are there any questions on non-departmental before we go to the actual departments?
Council? I'm seeing shaking heads, so I guess we move forward. Go ahead, Mr. Rania.
This is where my MC duties will kick in. So we're going to start with corporate services, and Ms. Chapman, the Director of Corporate Services, will take it from here.
Welcome, Debbie.
Welcome, thank you. Thanks, Phil. So corporate services, although it says the public services, corporate management and information technology, it basically covers divisions for legislative or clerk's division, the information technology and corporate communications. Next slide. The net budget indicates a 4% overall increase over 2021, and we'll go through that over the next few slides. So the bubbles, I quite like the bubbles. I think it adds definitely a depth to the budget binders. So in there, I'm not going to individually name each of them, but the services that are in corporate services budget include legal, insurance, advertising and postage under the administrative service portion, council, municipal election, bylaw and animal control contracts, our crossing guards for our 8 locations, IT software, licensing and network, and cemetery. So those are kind of the key ones. And I know there's some in there of what the costs are for those in the 2022 budget. Next slide. Our new operating initiatives and enhanced services for 2022. So the 80,500 for staffing levels under the GIS technician. This is one of the positions that did have pre-approval, and the consolidation or the move from GIS from planning, economic growth and community development division over to being under IT, so into a corporate approach. Not that they weren't doing it, but it's just moving it in under that division. And that is with a new dedicated GIS technician. So again, the more software we get into, programs like that calls on resources for mapping and apps and that type of thing. The 28,300 plus internal resources for the engagement. It's so great to hear all the positive comments in regards to the engagement. It is one of the areas that we are working on diligently to try and make it better, two-way communication and getting information out. So the 28.3 is reflective of an engagement strategy that we are working on. So as I said, township app, policy on how we engage with the public so the public knows what to expect, when to expect it, and also our continuous enhancements to our interactive website. And I know some before me had spoke on it, but in regards to the report of concern and the online payments, we hope the public will bear with us as we're getting through some of the learning curves on them or some of the little glitches that may happen. But I think it will ultimately provide a better service to the public. The 23,000, again, what plus internal resources for the communication. It's again on trying to get what we do and how we do it out in our report card. The use of the roadside billboards that was mentioned earlier as well. And then again, our online presence. The other initiatives that rely on internal resources are promoting our brand awareness and promoting the community council and staff accomplishments. So again, it's just trying to enhance both our internal and external communications with the public and with our stakeholders. And the lastly is the 100,000 for the service delivery review. This was done in 2020, and as we're going through some of the service delivery review highlights would be funded through this area, and that is corporate wide, so it's not just for corporate services. Next slide. So the key operating changes for the corporate services, again, the general liability insurance is up. Our software costs have gone down slightly, and it's anticipated that this trend will continue as we continually review and consolidate our needs corporately. So again, that's part of looking at the programs that we're using and how we can make changes there. The next two increases correspond with ensuring we have the resources and tools to do all the enhancement in our communication initiatives and do it well. And the last is an increase in our contingency for the integrity commissioner. And this is where we budget a nominal amount in operating, and then additional costs would be covered through the stabilization reserves. And that's just, again, to try and even it out over the years. And I believe that might be it.
And that is it for Ms. Chapman. So if anyone has questions for corporate services before we let her go.
Council, any questions on that? Any questions on that material? I'm seeing none at this time. I'm sure we'll come up with some later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chapman.
Okay, next department we're going to speak to is business services. So Stephen Dickey, Director of Business Services, Treasurer, will go through that one.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, so business services, just a refresher, currently is made up of human resources, asset management, and financial services. Next slide. Just looking at the overall budget, so just a fairly flat year over year, a few minor changes, so which we'll talk about in a couple of slides. So just a small decrease of 3%. For bubbles, again, just highlighting a couple things, as Phil's mentioned, just interested sometimes to get an idea of the order of magnitude of certain non-salary things that are included in these budgets. A lot of business services is internal labor that does the work. A lot of technology or a lot of consulting costs are included there. A lot of people costs that do the work. But just a couple of things to highlight here. Our annual fees for audit is about $25,000, our required statutory annual audit. So that's interesting. HR programs and corporate training, 45,000. So that's as a corporation, there's things that we do centrally for the whole organization are included here. Things like leadership training, health and safety programs, long service award events, wellness events, that kind of thing. So to just get an idea of that order of magnitude of some of those programs. Administrative cost recovery revenues. So not all costs are recovered from other departments where the work is done, but for strategic funding purposes, some of the administrative costs are funded from either the ferry as qualified costs able to recover under the ferry funding agreements, transit and utilities is the largest one, where a portion of costs that are used to run and administer the utility operations are recovered to help make sure that those costs get funded by rates as opposed to taxes. Next slide. Looking at some of the strategic initiatives that some of these have carried over from 2021 as well. So under asset management, one of the key strategic initiatives from council is looking at our heritage properties. So there's some money there each next few years to continue to look at assessing our heritage properties and as part of the developing a strategy for those for the municipality going forward. Multi-year operating budgets. Another key strategic thing for finance is improving our forecasting and our ability to report and plan and show different scenarios going forward for capital and operating. So we have bought that software. That was part of the budget, capital budget for 2021. So next year we will be carrying on with implementing and testing the new software with the goal of incorporating it into our 2023 plan. Internal resources, one of the key items there is we currently do have a bit of a piecemeal system for tracking our HR information, our training. Some of our personnel data is in different systems or spreadsheets are tracked in different ways. So one of the objectives has been to come up with a more centralized, streamlined way to efficiently track and store the information electronically. So this is something we're looking at, mostly doing the work in-house. We will be looking at a capital budget item for that in IT as well. And we have applied for funding through one of the modernization grant programs to pay for some of that. So we haven't heard back on that yet. And finally, under employer choice, we are required or are planning on completing a pay equity study. We did start the work this year, so that will be done. Something will take time from our HR folks next year to be done before the end of next year, before our next collective agreement. And finally, just to take a look at some of the key changes, not a lot in business services. We've trimmed a couple of kind of more discretionary ones in training and health and safety. Health and safety, we did have a consultant for a couple of years, so we've kind of trimmed that back. Find that we weren't getting the value out of that consultant, so we're doing more in-house. We have some good staff in-house that are good in health and safety, and our programs are improving. Annual audit fees, just more out of interest. We did tender our audit this past year, as you may be aware. We are changing auditors based on the tender process, but we also were able to save some audit fees as well as part of that going out to the market. And again, some of the other seminars and some consulting, based on our actual experience over the last few years and what we think we're going to need, we've trim some of those a little bit to help save some costs. And we did hire a new HR consultant last year. That's a staff position, and again, we'll be started partway through the year last year, so we'll have a full year of that that staff this year, and some of that's been partially funded by stabilizing reserves. So those are the key changes for business services. Not a lot of significant changes year over year.
That's it for business services. If anyone has.
Council, any questions in this area? Okay, actually did have one, and you may have spoke to this already, but just the idea of the cultural and heritage asset strategy. I mean, I certainly understand our asset management plan and how that's part of our long-term financial stability strategy to make sure that that all works. But the cultural and heritage asset strategy is about the functions that happen under a different department. And so I'm wondering why the decision to keep that one within this department. If that question makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think we, Lori and I talked about that. I mean, it could have been in either department. It's really the asset piece of it. It's related to the function of the building, but it's really kind of the asset side of it, assessment side of it. So it could, I think just to separate it from the operations, kind of as there'll be kind of one-time things as we go through and do these assessments. There'll be one-time things. So rather than build those numbers into the ongoing operation and programs of the heritage assets, these kind of one-time assessments, we decided to put them into asset management at this point. They could have gone in either place. That's kind of just a decision we made. But so it's a good question though.
Okay, so it was just a management decision to allocate it there. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Dickey? Seeing none, so I guess we move forward to the next department.
Yes, our next department is emergency services. So the esteemed chief, Mr. Stevenson, will speak to that.
Welcome, Fred.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tonight, it's my pleasure to present to you the Emergency Services 2022 operating budget requirements. Next slide, Philip, please. The Emergency Services 2022 operating budget request is for an increase of $148,000 or 8% over our 2021 budget. This is outlined on page 25 of your binder. There are no increases in the level of service or new programs included in the 2022 budget. Next slide, please, Phil. My bubbles. So included within the emergency services operating budget are all wages for both full-time as well as our part-time firefighters. Maintenance and operating costs for our 4 fire stations have been reduced in the 2022 budget, mainly due to certain duties being assigned to full-time staff working from the Amherst station. Fuel costs, fleet costs, mandatory testing of the fleet, as well as preventive maintenance programs are up slightly, mainly due to the cost of parts and some of the equipment that we have to rent. Insurance costs for both the fire stations as well as fleet operations have increased by 26% or approximately $10,000. That's about $7,000 for our fleet and $3,000 for our 4 fire stations. Next slide, Philip. Key operating changes. These are also outlined on page 26 of your binder. The addition of the full-time staff that was approved in October accounts for $120,000 of our $148,000 budget increase. So that's the 2 full-time ones for a full 12 months in 2022, as well as the budget differential between the October to December period that was in last year's budget. Fleet insurance has increased. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, about $7,000. Our audit and legal fees, we've been advised there will be no audit requirement in 2022 by MTO of our driver certification program. The increases in our 2022 budget, mainly in staffing costs, identifies our priority in striving to maintain our permanent part-time volunteer fire service. This service remains very professional, efficient, and cost-effective. COVID has had a very negative impact on all fire services, and Loyalist is no exception. We continue to struggle to maintain staffing levels and provide required training as per occupational health and safety. 75% of our part-time firefighters continue to respond on an almost daily basis, regardless of local conditions. Included in this budget are certain improvements to the firefighters' PPE for their continued safety and well-being. That's it.
Okay, thank
Short and
you.
sweet.
Council, do we have any questions for the chief? Again, I'll start things off. Chief, can you tell me, well, first of all, how many part-time firefighters do we have? And how many full-time fire staff of all stripes do we have for this right now?
We have 8 full-time staff. We have 4 full-time firefighters. We have a chief, a deputy, a mechanic, and a fire inspector.
Excellent. And for the part-time firefighters?
We are down to 84. We've always strived to keep a complement of about 100. We're down to about 84, and 6 of them are not active. They're out for one reason or another. So we're down to just below 80, which is leaving us a little worrisome at times, but we've just gone through the interviewing and the physical testing requirement for a recruit class that's going to start on the 4th of January. We were hoping to get 10 or 12. We're going to start with 8. And if things work out okay, we may do a second recruit program starting in July.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. And where do we stand? You had come to council a number of years ago with the target of bringing in some full-time firefighters, specifically with the idea that it was getting harder and harder to have part-time firefighters responding, especially during the day when they're working. Where do we stand on that long-term plan right now?
So when I did the presentation last September asking for the full-time staff to start in October, with the goal of putting them on 7 days a week as of January 2022, we'd identified that although we were having a positive impact on our daytime run numbers by 3 full-time firefighters would get us to almost where we needed to be, which was an average of 10 firefighters, we were finding that our weekend numbers were also falling off dramatically. So that was why we elected, which was included in that report. So starting on January 4th, there will be 1 firefighter on. There will be a minimum of 1 firefighter on 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that will definitely assist. It also alleviates some of the weekend call outs that the on-call chiefs have to do, because we get called out for an alarm ringing or a battery beeping or something that the person on daytime can definitely handle for us. So we're there. Loyalist Township is going to undergo a comprehensive risk assessment and a full master fire plan sometime in 2023. At the end of, when that is completed, then the staffing model will definitely have to be reevaluated to see where we are, where we're going, what our staffing levels are, how much longer we're going to be able to maintain the volunteer fire service. I would hope as a taxpayer that we can maintain our volunteer fire service for another 10 years at its current level by supplementing it with 4 or 6 full-time people. You know, we're currently paying pretty well the exact amount for our full-time firefighting staff as we are for the 87 volunteer firefighters. So it's definitely a very cost-effective program, and it's a very professional program. And our volunteer firefighters, they live in this community. They take ownership of it, and they're very proud of their fire department, as council's witnessed on more than one occasion when you visited our fire station. So,
absolutely, thank you. Anyone else have questions for the chief? Deputy, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, just following up on the comment you made about the comprehensive review that's coming up. Is that the time when there'll be a review on what the adequate number of firefighters are for the expanding community. And I'm just looking at it with the number, with the growth that we've got, and we've stayed, as long as I can remember, we've stayed in the ballpark of 100. At some point, 100 isn't going to serve the size of the community we have. So I'm just wondering, is that something that will be reviewed through that as well?
It will definitely be reviewed through that. It will also get a bit of a review next year. Our Underwriters Superior Water Shuttle program is due for renewal next year. Council supported us with the allowing us to purchase the little bit larger tankers. So we are going to hopefully try for our commercial rating, which will benefit more and more of our ratepayers. But when underwriters come in and do a review, I think that there are definitely members of council present that were here when we built the Amersfoort Fire Station. And one of the goals with that was that underwriters came in and said we needed to keep 30 firefighters in Amersfoort. And that was when we took that level to 100, because previous to that, it was at 90. So we took it to 100, and they're the ones that set that level. And although it's a volunteer fire service, they can't force us to do it. They have to, when they come in, they make sure that we're actively recruiting and trying to maintain people and have retention programs, which we have all that in place. So, but we'll get a little bit of probably an awakening next year when they do the underwriters audit, and then that will lead into the comprehensive risk assessment the following year. So, but yeah, I can definitely see, if we're going to maintain the volunteer fire level, I can definitely see probably an increase of 5 to 7 firefighter volunteers being required for the Amersfoort, Bath, and Odessa fire stations, just because of the build and the building stock and the type of fires we get today. We don't get as many fires, but when we do get a fire, they're very hot and violent with new construction and new building materials.
Thank you. Anything else, Deputy? I think Jim may have frozen.
I think he froze.
Anything else from any other members of council? Hopefully that provided the answer for the deputy. I think there's nothing further. Oh, Councillor Buderick, did I see your hand? No? Okay. If there's nothing further, then we'll move forward. And thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. The next departments are Economic Growth and Community Development Services. And Ms. Merritt will be here to that.
Well, thank you, Phil. Yes, so in this section, we'll discuss the operating budget for the Development Division and the Engineering and Environmental Division. The operating budget for the Utilities Service area will be presented a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So, as I just mentioned, our department provides our community with development services. So it includes planning and building, as well as engineering and environment services. So from an operating budget standpoint, staff from our engineering and environment division reviews plans submitted for subdivisions and site plans, for examples. And they also handle the administration and inspection of the construction and approval of these plans. So in one of the bubble here, you'll see that roughly $216,000 of internal labor and admin costs for 2022 is recoverable from developers. Internal labor in the tune of $25,000 is also recoverable for lot grading certificate work, which comes at the offset of development work. So that's based on a permit fee, and it's estimated number of building permits anticipated for 2022. Our planning division also guides consent and minor variance application, zoning and OP amendments, as well as site plan and subdivision applications, and make recommendations to assist council and the committee of adjustment in making decisions with respect to these applications. The proposed budget includes a projected revenue of $55,000 for planning applications for 2022. The planning division also assists the Heritage Committee for the review, approval, and administration of the Heritage Grant Program. So a budget, excuse me, of $13,000 is proposed for Heritage Grant. The maximum amount per application is $5,000. And we typically see interest in that program after we send out information about the grant program, usually in the spring. This department is also responsible for real estate transactions for township-owned land being sold for development. So as our CAO mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're anticipating $800,000 net contribution to the Industrial and Business Parks Revenue Fund. And that's from the closing of sales of 8 lots in the Lotus Seas Business Park, and also 1.5 million net contribution to the reserves from the anticipated closing of the sale of the north portion of the township-owned land in the Taylor Kidd Industrial Park. And I think the last bubble is the building division is responsible for the enforcement of the building code. This includes guiding applicants through the building permit application process, and review of applications and inspections. So with a boom in new builds and renovation projects over the last 2 years, we have projected a revenue of $590,000 from building permit fees in 2022. Next slide, please. So the proposed net budget for 2022 for the general rate portion of the department is an increase of $45,000 over 2021, or a 5% increase. And it's mainly for cost of living, wages, and benefit increases, as was mentioned previously in the presentation. And the department's operating budget represents 6% of the total levy requirement. Next slide, please. So some new operating initiatives and enhanced services for 2022. So to address the establishment of a comprehensive development application strategy, staff in the planning, building, and engineering and environment divisions processed an unprecedented number of development applications of all types this year, resulting in a significant increase in building permits issued with subdivisions, site plans, and building inspections, and there is no sign of slowing down. So late in 2021, a surplus in staffing budget from delayed hiring, as was explained earlier, was used to retain the services of a planning consultant to assist in reviewing planning applications. Not only is this helping with the workload, but it also allows for comparison of past decisions made on contentious files, and it validates staff's objectivity. We are proposing a budget of $60,000 for 2022 to continue this practice. The other initiative is the Amherst West Secondary Plan project is progressing well. Out of the total commitment of $338,000 for this project, we started late in 2020, and it is to undertake studies and develop land use concepts for future development of the land. We're proposing a budget of $105,000 to complete the plan. We're aiming for an open house in January to present 3 land use concepts and also receive feedback in preparation for recommendations to council in the summer of 2022. That these costs are fully recoverable through development charges. We're also proposing a budget of $25,000 to assist in the completion of a comprehensive zoning bylaw. We were very pleased that our official plan was approved by council this fall, and it's now awaiting approval at the county level. Once approved, staff will request authorization from council to begin review of the zoning bylaw to bring it into conformity with the revised official plan. This will include looking at zoning bylaw amendment trend to consider appropriate changes, aiming at reducing the number of amendments requests in the future. The budget requested is to engage an outside expert to assist us in updating certain sections of the bylaw, such as our parking policies. And this is also funded through development charge. So under this strategy, also the planning technician, I think Debbie mentioned that, but the planning technician / GIS coordinator was split into 2 positions in the approved reorg of the corporate service department. So the full cost of a planning technician is also in this budget. In the past, it was 75% planning, 25% GIS. To continue our efforts in achieving the environmental responsibility strategic goal, we're proposing a budget of $50,000 to undertake a soil remediation study in partnership with Queen's and the Royal Military College. The study will examine the feasibility of using fetal remediation to treat salt-impacted soil. I practiced that word a lot tonight. So an application for funding will be submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund Program. And if successful, the study would provide the township with a low-cost, low-energy method of treating soils containing low levels of salt contamination as a result of winter road maintenance activities. So this would allow for reuse opportunities for this material and effectively turning it into a resource. The township is also very fortunate to participate in the Advancing Adaptation Project, which will allow the corporation and community to plan for the impact of climate change in a fiscally responsible manner. This collaborative program provides free consulting support from a Canadian non-for-profit organization for local governments, and it's to facilitate the development of a risk and vulnerability assessment report in 2022. And later in the year, we'll also be developing some relevant actions to address locally identified climate risks and create a climate adaptation plan for the community. This project is a great example of interdivisional and interdepartmental partnership to incorporate relevant actions in municipal operations. For the asset management strategy, we are continuing with our infrastructure master plan. So this year, the budget proposed is $90,000, and it's included in Public Works and the Utilities operating budget. And again, it's for external costs, consulting costs to complete the master plan. This plan, though, is largely done in-house and is well underway. We're expecting completion late summer 2022. Under the financial strategy, we are currently finalizing the building permit rate review. A detailed financial analysis is nearly complete to review the sustainability of the current permit rates if council envisions a self-funded model. Draft report is expected to be presented at a committee of the whole early in 2022 to get direction on a preferred funding model, as well as the impact of the general rate for each model. It's been completely done in-house with the help of staff from business services and building services. Okay, next slide, please. Key operating changes can be categorized in 3 main schemes: staffing, revenue, and municipal real estate sales. So the increase in salaries and benefits this year is attributed to the full impact of the environmental technician positions that was added in 2021, and also the transition from part-time to full-time for the planning assistant position. It was previously called the heritage assistant. Another key operating change is the increase of building permit revenues. We're forecasting an increase of about $56,000 and planning application revenues by about $11,000. The sales for the Loyalist East Business Park are expected to come in at just over $970,000. Most lots were sold in 2020, and site plan applications are being prepared. The sale of these lots will close on approval of site plans. Decision was made to split one of the larger lot into 2 smaller lots a few months ago. We currently have 4 lots left for sale with incoming offers on 3 of the 4 lots. I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That is the last slide, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Council, do we have any questions for Director Merritt? Seeing none. You're certainly keeping busy, MJ. And I don't have any questions for this one either. And
Okay. The next one we're going to touch on is the external agencies, and I believe Mr. Silver is going to speak to that.
okay.
Thanks, Phil. This one is actually a decrease, so I said I'll do these 2 slides. So it is it's good news, $2,200, not a lot, but it's going in the right direction. The Ontario, next slide, Phil, please. The Ontario Provincial Police allocation to Loyalist, it's 2.5 million now, but that is a decrease from 2021 by $22,100. We have included the community safety and well-being plan of $23,000, just as sort of a worst case scenario in case we continue with that. I owe council a report, follow-up report on this topic. We have been discussing with Mr. Finnegan and the other local municipalities, the other 4 in the county. Actually, just yesterday, we had another meeting. So I think you'll see some action on this moving forward. So we've included that as well. We haven't paid that invoice yet. And as you heard at the last council meeting, the Conservation Authority is up about 4% or $9,400, and they presented their budget to council last month. And that is the slide.
Okay, council, do you have any questions for Mr. Silver? I'll go to Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, I just was curious, maybe I missed it in the notes, but the Ontario Provincial Police still has the agreement, as I understand it, to be the highest paid police force. And then it was left at the hands of the municipalities, of course, to make that happen. But anyway, I'm just curious, is there, why would it decrease? I guess is.
So there's a formula that they base their costing on. There's a base that's charged to Loyalist, and then also on the number of calls as well. So, and I should also mention that we do receive some revenue as well through provincial offenses. So it's decreased just because of where they're spending their time. Now, in talking to the detachment commander, we talk to him quite regularly about speeding complaints and that sort of thing. So the cars are in the area, but those are actually crime across the county. Unfortunately, break and enters are up, but other portions of the calls that they're having to attend to are down. Yeah. So it's based on, part of it is based on actual time spent in Loyalist.
Okay. Because my point, I guess, what I was going is, you answered it, was if anything, most of the residents want to see more policing in Amherst in particular regarding speeding, right? And I still have not witnessed any radar myself personally, but maybe they are doing it. I certainly hope so. But So I think it's something almost the residents would be willing to see an increase in if that meant they would actually be patrolling more. Again, it's everywhere. I realize speeding is, but in Amherst in particular, especially in some of the newer areas where we have younger families and small children, and then you have streets like Spears and whatnot. But anyway, just curious about that. So thank you.
Yeah, hopefully in 2022 we'll see the formation of a county-wide police detachment
Services
board as well. Yeah,
board,
yeah. I don't want to call it it's not the same thing as the former boards, but so hopefully that will give the mayor or the council representative some input into servicing from the OPP. So we look forward to that.
If I could add to that as well, as Mr. Silver noted, we are billed, I'll say, for future service based on past calls and the call volume that has been part of our actual record. So while we don't get to say, okay, we'll pay you more money if you spend more time here, the opposite is completely true. The more calls they get from our residents, the more attendance they will put into our areas, and the higher our bill will be in the coming year.
Mhm.
So while it's effectively the same thing, it's just a difference in whether we're pushing or pulling that activity, if you will. If the residents are having concerns, whether it's speeding or other issues, I always encourage them to make the phone call to the police, likely the non-emergency line, and those calls trigger more activity in our area and more patrol, et cetera, in our area. And yes, we will see the budget adjust for that in the coming years. Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else, council? I'm seeing no other questions. And I also note that it is now 8:05. We've gone through about an hour and a half worth of this, and we are coming in, if I'm following the sequence in correctly, we're coming into community and customer services, which tends to be a very large portfolio to review on budget. Does council wish to take a 10-minute break? I'm seeing some nod. I'm seeing one shake.
Not from my end. I'm prepared to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Buderich, I can't really see you right now. You want a break or no?
I'm good to keep going forward.
Deputy Mayor, I think I saw you shaking your head that we don't need. And Councillor Gordon, I think we have a consensus that we'll just keep moving forward then. Okay, Mr. Renier, if you would.
As you said, Mayor, our next department is the Community and Customer Services, and Ms. McFarland will be speaking to that group.
Thank you. Welcome, Laurie.
So tonight, I'm going to run through our budget for the Community and Customer Services Department, and it's comprised of Heritage, Culture and Tourism, Recreation and Facilities, and Public Works. Next slide, please. This year, we're proposing roughly an $8 million budget for 2022 as an operating budget. And it's a departmental increase of 7%, and it represents 43% of the total levy requirement. Next slide, please, Phil. The first division that I'm going to review tonight is Heritage, Culture, and Tourism. And in this division, we strive to enhance the special places connected to Loyalist Township's past through empowered community members and partners, resulting in elevated public enjoyment of the unique cultural assets. The division is proposing an approximate budget of $600,000, and this is the first full year of operating for this division. These are some of the operating expenses that are part of the operating budget. We have the operation of and maintenance of 10 community buildings, Bath Canada Day, and the operation of our maintenance, operation and maintenance of 2 of our libraries. These are just highlighting a little bit of what is comprised in the budget. Some key operating changes for this division. As I stated, this is the first full year of operation for this division. Therefore, the salaries for staff have been reallocated to this division, and it includes the full year of the manager's salary as well. In the budget, there's a reflection of a $4,000 decrease in donations for Light Up the Season. This actually is a correction to reflect the traditional amount that we receive from a larger benefactor. It was a double counted last year, and that's why what we received was right, but what was budgeted was incorrect. So this is just a correction. With the development of programming and increasing the use of the buildings, the operating costs are increasing. And the increase in property insurance that was highlighted at the beginning of this budget presentation is also reflected throughout all of the budgets, as you have seen. Bill? So some new operating initiatives and enhanced services in 2022 in this division that we wanted to highlight is Light Up the Season. We want to build on the traditional Light Up the Season event, but stretch it throughout the township. We're looking to remove all in-person elements of that traditional event and flip it to a more self-guided and virtual experience. We will be doing a new focus on lighting up the historical sites in the township, and we are hoping to do this through the support from community organizations and volunteers. We are looking at doing lights and decor at each location. We're looking at a very conservative first steps for year 1 with the hope of receiving community support and build excitement about it. We are looking at doing promotional driving tour maps that will be developed to highlight the sites and encourage residents and tourists and visitors to travel throughout the entire township. We want to be looking at culture and developing culture and tourism strategy. And we hope to do this by expanding our Loyalist Days to school programs. Local elementary schools will be invited to participate in day-long programs at the Fairfield Goodside House, pending COVID restrictions, of course. Students will learn about Loyalist history through local historians and enthusiasts and participate in hands-on learning activities. We will be developing Loyalist tourism packages to promote and be promoted online, and they'll be based on interests, agricultural experience, dine and shop, and are just a few examples. We will be promoting various local tourism campaigns that will encourage people to move throughout the community with different activities as well, which I will outline a little bit later. And then Culture Days. We are hoping to host a Culture Days event. Culture Days as a national celebration of arts and culture. The programs invite the public to get hands-on and behind the scenes to highlight the importance of arts and culture in our communities. We are planning to launch a volunteer management software program. And we're doing this with the goal of strengthening community culture and building collaborative relationships with volunteers. The platform will enable easy and accurate tracking and management of volunteers. It will also create a user-friendly process for both staff and potential volunteers and allow for staff to be able to determine and recognize the amount of volunteer hours that is contributed to assist with delivering different corporate programs and initiatives. This is a corporate platform, and some examples beyond this division that could utilize this are recreation and facilities, for programming, and then volunteers for climate action plan initiatives and community goals. We have applied for grant funding to purchase this software as well. Resources will be spent educating citizens on volunteer opportunities, building a database, and in strengthening community relations through civic empowerment. We are going to be focusing on the management of cultural and heritage assets. We want to protect our historical artifacts. We are going to be working with a conservator to evaluate and provide expertise for preservation of our collections. We're going to be focusing on the Fairfield Goodside House to start. We want to share our history with community and strengthen the community partnerships. We're planning to support arts and cultural events and reopen for summer tours. Bill, if you could do the next slide, please. I thought that we wanted to just highlight a little bit more and highlight basically the events and the plans that we have from April through to the summer. So this one is the first one. We're starting in April. As in past years, the Bill Lowry Award will be presented to a recipient selected by the mayor. With COVID restrictions, the volunteer opportunities have been very limited. So we will do our best to recognize those volunteers that have been able to contribute to the community. In May is Museum Month. And we are planning to encourage and support dialogue and collaboration among our museum stakeholders. We want to highlight the reopening of museums in the township, as long as that is allowed to happen. Most of this was, we are hoping very much so that we can get through COVID and get back to some more normal times in many of our divisions, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way. We want to align with May is Museum Month program that's hosted by the Ontario Museum Association. We're going to be spotlighting the museums by sharing photos and stories and releasing details regarding summer hours of operations and the programmings that will be happening. And we plan to launch a summer passport program that will encourage people to visit various sites. In June, we will be introducing a new event, which is the National Indigenous Peoples Day. And we're continuing on the path of truth and reconciliation and support continued learning. The event will open with the mayor sharing the land acknowledgement as a formal welcome to the space. There will be traditional performances by Indigenous artists, a reading from an author poet, educational components such as language and teaching, and the sharing of historical relevant documents. We are working with an advisory committee that's going to be helping our Bath Canada Day committee, as well as the committee for the National Indigenous Peoples Day. And we will be, depending on their recommendations, for any further other programs for this. In July, we will be doing the Doors Open in partnerships with Ontario Heritage Trust. It's a province-wide festival to celebrate cultural heritage. It highlights heritage properties to visit that are normally not open to the public. And we are going to be hoping all owners of heritage properties in the township will be encouraged to participate. The Bath Canada Day Committee has been meeting regularly, and the hope is that they'll be able to do in-person events again in 2022, and they will be focusing on daytime events. We want to try and do Tunes Days in the township. We are promoting that we will do concerts at different properties throughout the township, and they will be focused on a variety of genres for different demographics. There'll be free family-friendly performances, and they'll highlight local entertainers. Some other fun ideas that we are working on is an escape room experience at the Fairfield Goodside House, paranormal seekers, highlighting cemeteries and the Fairfield Goodside House, some tourism trail development, seasonal community challenges, scavenger hunts, and Maple Weekend. These are ideas aligning with the philosophy established by the Bank of Ideas, a leader in community placemaking. The HCT division will focus on building and nourishing relationships, as this is the core of building healthy and inclusive communities. Dedicated efforts will be placed on developing volunteer teams and a cultural asset map to help identify our strengths. Through collaboration, projects which have been highlighted will be implemented with the goal of igniting energy and creative thinking within the community to support continued partnerships and growth. Sorry, I just have one more thing to say. I just wanted to highlight that staff have been busy looking at grants, opportunities to help fund all of these programs. And we currently have 3 applications out, 2 focused around Canada Day celebrations, one with it's called RT09, which is the Regional Tourism Organization. And it's funded through the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture. And we are currently looking at another one that is centered around the Queen's Jubilee celebrations that we feel may be eligible for some of the programs that we have here. Okay. Recreation and facilities. Sorry, I lost track of my slides. This division is proposing an approximate 2022 operating budget of $2.8 million. Next slide, please. These are some of the key expenditures and revenues that are included in the development of this budget. As you can see, to operate the Recreation and Facilities division, there are many expenses and many revenues that go into developing that budget. We are still including the $50,000 reserve fund contribution for emergency pool repairs. It is a daily challenge to keep that pool operating with the aging infrastructure that we are dealing with right now. And staff are doing a fantastic job in doing that. Next slide, please. These are some key operating changes. The pool revenues is projected to increase, but that is offset by an increase in part-time staffing expenses. There are maintenance costs. There are some maintenance costs that are increasing at the recreation center. Part of that is for repairs to the floor in the Zamboni room, and some of it is for some work in the administration offices. Again, as in previous slides, the insurance for facilities and fleet are increases accordingly, as indicated throughout this presentation. The sand beach decrease reflects the completion of initiative to address dune stabilization that started in 2020. The parks budget, as well as the public works budget, includes money for tree maintenance and tree planting and tree replacement. This supports the strategic objective of being a municipal leader in climate action and environmental stewardship. It supports our climate action plan goal number 1 to plant 20,000 trees over the next 10 years. This is a key component of the federal government's climate action in investing $3 billion and working with communities to plant 2 billion trees over 10 years. If we are able to achieve this target and working together, that would mean that it works to about 1 tree per resident based on the projected 2030 population. In addition to the regular 2022 tree replacement program, staff were recently presented with an opportunity by CRCA that would also assist with reaching this goal. Staff have provided municipal properties that would meet the requirements of 2 funding programs, the $50 million tree program offered by Forest Ontario and the Highway of Heroes tree campaign, as we are located within 30 kilometers of the 401 corridor. This program offers a top-up on the $50 million tree program, so we can purchase the seedlings at a lower price. All of these trees in this program would be planted in the spring of 2022, and the engineering and environmental staff will be bringing a report to council with further details on this program. It's a great example of many departments and divisions working together to achieve this initiative. This takes forces from environmental engineering and environment, recreation and facilities, and public works staff. The other thing I just wanted to highlight here is that the Emerald Ash Borer has severely impacted this municipality, and there will be a separate project presented as part of the 2022 capital project to assist with the replacement of these natural assets. And you will see that when we do the capital budget. The next division is Public Works. And, whoops. It's proposing an approximate 2022 operating budget of 4.5 million. It's for the operating portion of Public Works, excluding transportation, as both transit and the ferry operations are not funded through the tax base. Bill, thank you. These are some key expenditures and revenues that are included in the development of this budget. Again, there is a great deal of revenues and as well as costs and expenditures that go into operating our Public Works division. Some new operating initiatives and enhanced services. Closed circuit video inspections for our storm sewers. We're trying again to do a proactive plan. This year, they've only occurred where other infrastructure is being replaced. And unfortunately, staff were not able to initiate a proactive programming plan in 2021, but we are planning to do so in 2022. By performing regular inspections, small problems can be addressed before turning into large, costly repairs. And this may extend the infrastructure life as well. The township is required to conduct inspections of all bridges and large culverts every 2 years. The report this year, we'll be doing the study, and it will be used to identify repairs and preventative maintenance activities for the asset management plan to maximize the life expectancy of the assets. Sorry. Some key operating changes. The county originally indicated they would not be asking the township to complete as much work in 2022 as they did in 2021. But some good news, they have requested additional work this year after this budget submission. So we expect that there will not be this large of a revenue reduction. We have proposed budget increases for increased preservation strategies for roads and bridges. And the contract for the locate services has increased, and this is the portion of the stormwater. And the 17% increase in insurance that was highlighted at the beginning of the presentation is again reflected here. We are projecting an increase in bag tag sales, and that's due to more enforcement by the waste collection contractor. We have just the inflationary increases for the waste collection contracts. And the maintenance and monitoring costs for the landfill sites, they've been adjusted based on past averaged actuals of the maintenance portion. And we have an increase in the quarry reserve fund transfer for gravel road improvements as requested by council resolution. And now the transportation portion, ferry and transit. And they are not, as I've stated, they're not funded as part of the general levy. So to deliver transit services, we're projecting roughly an approximately $1 million operating budget, and it's an approximate increase of $157,000. Amherst View's Route 10 transit route is typically funded through special area rate, 70% by the special area rate that applies to Amherst View residents only, 10% by fares, 15% by gas tax, and 5% by cross-boundary revenue. The Amherst View Transit special rate area has been in existence for many years, and this rate is not proposed to be increased in 2022. The graph, it depicts the ridership from 2013 to 2021. And it continues to show that the pandemic is having significant impacts on the ridership and fare collection. This budget includes the full year of funding for the accessible transit service pilot project in Amherst View to correlate with the current Route 10 transit service area. This pilot project is proposed to be funded by gas tax funding. Work continues on a Napanee, Odessa, Kingston transit route utilizing provincial funding that was made available to the 2 municipalities by the county. The transit budget also includes a $50,000 allocation for additional study towards a rural transit service, which will include potential modifications to service the industrial park. The ferry budget. To deliver ferry services, the approximate operating 2022 budget is $3.9 million. The 2022 ferry operating budget includes a $90,000 consulting fee increase related to the development of a safety management system for the new ferry, and a staffing proposal that is currently under consideration by MTO, which is necessary to support the operation of the new Amherst Islander 2 ferry. I wanted to, this is the new Amherst Islander 2 at the Stella Dock, and that's our new fleet and transportation supervisor that's standing in front of it. And then we have a picture of the ferry docks office and the passenger facilities. The docks are in operation, but the facilities unfortunately are not. And I wanted to end this with a picture of the new ferry being docked at, coming into the dock at Stella, and it's being our acting senior ferry captain Filson is at the helm of the ferry. And that concludes the community and customer services department. I have to say it's been a very, very challenging year for this department with all of the COVID, and I've been very proud of our staff trying to deliver the services that they had to the community under very trying and challenging times with the multiple changes to protocols and regulations and different challenges they're facing. They've done a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie, and I very much agree that your staff have done an amazing job in keeping everyone safe, keeping each other safe, and as you say, living with the constant changing regulations and trying to keep up to them. So thank you very much for that. As far as questions for this departmental budget, Council, do we have anything? It's a lot of information. I'm seeing, oh, Am I seeing a hand? Seeing a couple hands. I'll go with Councillor Budrick first and Councillor Gordon second.
Okay, just quickly, I mean, to drill down, I mean, obviously I can see with the ridership on the bus, it is what it is. It's totally COVID related, but in the graph, it looks like there's the start of a bounce back, which is nice to see. The only other question I have is just curious to drill down on why such a large increase for the ferry budget. I'm just curious. Is it just because of the new technology and how we have to adapt to it?
Yes, and the potential increased staffing levels that are going to be required to actually operate the ferry, and the potential for increased levels. We don't have the numbers yet from Transport Canada that is going to tell us what those numbers are.
For sure, and I mean, like you said, it's a brand new unit that I mean is very new. So understanding it would be good, and the fact that we're budgeting a little extra is better safe than sorry. Thank you. That's perfect.
Laurie, on that topic, is it my understanding that at one point we were led to believe that we would need one extra person on the boat at all times of operations? I don't know if that's still in the plan. And is that what you're expecting right now?
If we're lucky, it's only going to be one.
That's still, that adds a huge amount to our overall wages, certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon, you had your hand up as well?
Yeah, I think more of an observation than a question, I guess, is that the 17% insurance increase, what's the insurance companies using as an excuse for this? But everything costs more, or the replacement costs, or liability issues, or what, or a combination of everything? That's a pretty major hike for 1 year.
I could maybe speak
Go
to
ahead,
that.
Mr. Renier.
In terms of insurance, generally up 17%. Like you said, there's a number of factors. As we know, municipalities are constantly, it's always an issue of us being brought in terms of liability on really anything that happens within the township. There's also market factors. There's, to my knowledge, I believe there's maybe 2 brokers now that generally will insure municipalities. So there's not exactly a large market for us to shop around for insurance that we obviously require. So, I mean, that factors into it. I'm sure we all, deal with insurance companies in our personal lives. So this is just kind of amplified on a larger scale at the township level. That's probably the best I can say.
So there's only 2 brokers that will handle municipal business. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes.
Oh, okay. Explain.
And if I could add to that, for as long as I've been around municipal councils, which is about 21 years now, one of the ongoing challenges that we keep pushing the province on is something called joint and several liability. And it's basically the idea that if there's some kind of legal suit, if there's an award for, let's call it $1 million, just to pull a number out of the air, right? If the municipality is deemed to be 1% liable for that $1 million, and some other party, maybe the other driver or something like that, is deemed to be 99% liable, the municipality can still be on the hook for the entire $1 million because we're deemed to have the deep pockets, supposedly. So ultimately, the order still has to be fulfilled. The victim gets their funds, but the insurance companies end up paying that out. And that one has been a battle with the province for a number of years, and it is still, working with the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, that is on our list of priorities for this year again. And we don't know if we'll actually make progress with the province on it, but hopefully. Other provinces have solved this issue. And it's a big part of why we keep on seeing these consistent large increases from the insurance companies.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Ms. McFarland? No? I don't see any more, so I guess we'll keep moving. Thank you, Laurie.
Great. The the next department, we're going to circle back to Miss Merritt, and she's just going to speak to the utilities, water and wastewater budget.
Welcome back.
Okay, so I'll bring us home. I guess I have the last few slides, plus maybe a couple more after that. So, okay, so the utilities division. So this next section of the budget, we'll talk about utilities. I believe either our CEO or our mayor talked about the number of facilities that we are responsible for. So the division provides, as you know, water and wastewater services to our customers. We have a number of sewage plants, water plants, and the related distribution and collection systems. But we provide the service for Amersview, Bath, Odessa, the Lloyd Estes Business Park, and it also includes drinking water to the hamlets of Harewood, Brooklands, and portions of the Taylor Kidd Industrial Park. So the overall budget, proposed budget for water and sewer for 2022 is 9.5 million, an overall increase of 4% over 2021. It's not considering the projected imposed charges activities. And the increase is mainly due to cost of living as well as wages and benefit increase. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide provides a visual of the change in water and sewer rates since 2019 and over the current rate study period. Council's direction has been to transition from a rate structure that was composed of 60% flat fee, or the monthly fixed rate, and 40% consumption. So I'm going to call it 60-40. To a 40% flat fee and 60% consumption. So 40-60 is what we're transitioning to. So the 2022 rates were presented and approved at a meeting of council on November 22nd. And the bylaw making the rates effective will come to council for approval at the next council meeting, December 13th. So the graph below on this slide is showing the history of bi-monthly user bills, and it illustrates a minimal impact on low and medium users. So the orange and red lines are your low and medium users, in comparison to the impact on high water users over the last 4 years. So the low and medium users combined, they make up about 60% of all our users. As expected, the high users have been the most impacted by the transition from the 60-40 rate to the rate structure to the 40-60 rate structure. So switching to that structure should also encourage water conservation and also delaying costly expansion to our infrastructure. Next slide, please. So these are some of the proposed initiatives and enhanced services for 2022. So the two strategic goals are environmental responsibilities and efficiency and effectiveness. So in reviewing lighting needs for a previous project, staff noted that a rough investment of $8,000 switching to LED fixtures and lights is projected to have a payback period of about 13 years. And you could save roughly $6,000 in operating cost over a 20-year life of the equipment. So it's also estimated that about 57% of hydro usage from lighting equipment can be saved compared to not doing anything, just staying status quo. So we started with some LED light fixture changes last year, and we're proposing to continue with that change with a $5,000 budget for this year. And it's to replace lights in utilities facilities to more energy efficient LED whenever the lights are due for replacements. We're also intending to make plumbing repairs in some of our facilities to reduce water loss, again, being conscious of being efficient, addressing health and safety issues, and also pest control measures throughout our treatment facilities, and that's with a budget of $5,000. Budget of $40,000 is proposed for tank cleaning and inspections. The focus will be cleaning one of the two digester tanks at the Amherst sewage plant. Again, we're suspecting there's plugged air headers, and that decreases efficiency on the blower equipment. It could damage the aeration equipment, and the power draw is fairly significant. So the cleaning activity will involve the contracting of pumper trucks and equipment needed for inspection and potential repairs. Another initiative is, with no additional budget, we will endeavor to continue with the implementation of work tracking and preventive maintenance tasks using the citywide software to assist with asset management. So the focus for 2022 will be continuing to with the maintenance work order system and starting to track water distribution system valves and hydrant maintenance. And that includes completed work and also follow-up that is required. Next slide, please. Some of the key operating changes for 2022, our insurance costs are going up like everybody else, and it's expected to go up by about $12,000 over 2022. The water, so in the budget impact for 2022 is there's a reduction for the water incentive program, but it's because we are proposing to use the stabilization reserve fund to fund that program. We received 14 applications in 2021, so it's a $50 rebate per address. So we are again proposing a budget of $30,000 for this year, and then we can review from year to year whether we need to increase or decrease. But this would be the second year that the program is implemented. We're expecting a reduction of $161,000, and it's due to the maturing of 2 loans for utilities infrastructure for 2022. The budget for sludge removal it's a necessary byproduct of wastewater treatment. It continues to be a significant expense for our sewage treatment facilities. However, we're expecting a reduction in cost of about $20,000, and it's as a result of implementation of a number of process changes. We are projecting for the reduction of hydro costs for the sewage treatment facilities by $16,000. And it's in part due to the excellent work of our utilities crew to implement efficiencies in our operations and being diligent in the selection of energy efficient equipment when the equipment is due for replacement, such as the LED fixtures that I mentioned previously. We've also installed some sensors for the HVAC equipment at the Amherst sewage treatment facility. So they operate only when the room is occupied. So it is quite economical to look for this sort of upgrades when the equipment is due for replacement. These initiatives not only reduce our energy consumption, but are significant in advancing our efforts in becoming environmental leaders, one of the township's strategic priority. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the bubble slide. Okay, so some of their significant costs in the operations of water and sewage facilities included in the budget well, it's always included in the budget, but so we do have a significant amount for treatment chemicals for both the sewage plant and the water treatment plant. The contract for sludge haulage for the 2 sewage treatment facilities it also has a large impact on that operational budget. We do have some property tax that we're paying for our facilities at the tune of $125,000 for the year. We have an amount budgeted for water meter reading contract. On the revenue side, aside from the obvious water and sewage rates, user rates, we also have bulk water revenue. We're projecting roughly $101,000 for 2022. And we also we also get some revenue from leased space on our water towers for communication equipment. I don't know if people knew that, but we have $55,000 a year for leased equipment, for leased space. And I think that's the last slide.
That is it for your utilities. Yep.
Okay. If there's any questions.
Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Merritt on the utility section? Or you can try to stump her. I would go back to the economic growth and development section. Okay. Actually, I did. It's not so much a question, but something I wanted to point out as I was looking at the budget binder. And Council, if you want to kind of follow along with me, page 45 of the budget binder is the overall utilities operating budget. And the thing that I noticed was that there are a long list, and it's a 9% increase overall. But two of those items are contribution to reserve funds for impost fees and contribution to capital. And so there's significant increases in those two. Other than that, there's an increase to the insurance expense. Every other line there is a negative. So which means everything that the staff could actually work on, control, and so I'm quite impressed with that. And I'm sorry if the other departments got that as well and I didn't catch it, but when I realized that other than our contributions to our own activities, every other line is a decrease. So that's quite impressive. Any other questions or comments for the utilities department through Ms. Merritt? Seeing none. Okay, we'll move forward.
All right. So with that, we're nearing the end of our program. So this is the mandatory slide every year that we present, where we say the budget is a policy document. By no means it's just the end of the road. Even when you approve budget, as we all know, throughout the year, there's constant reports coming, seeking further approvals, council bylaws, all that necessary stuff that keeps us busy throughout the year. So just with that, I was just gonna briefly touch on next steps. So we're here, review, discussion of budget items, operating budget. Any amendments as required if you would like that. Any recommendations? We do have it set up per the council report that was attached to this, is that the regular January 10th meeting would have the bylaw on there with the intention to adopt the operating budget by January 24th council, which is where you would vote on it. And it's not mentioned on here, but just a reminder, the capital budget is scheduled for, I believe it's Monday, January 31st, if that's a Monday, and that Thursday, that first week of February as well, that we'd be bringing capital then, which would be capital, probably some debt discussions and some more reserve funds. I do have a separate slide deck with the recommendations in the council report. If we get to that point, if you guys want to go over them by each point, but other than that, we're at the question guy.
And thank you very much, Phil. And I always appreciate that statement that, you know, budget is a policy document, and it has a lot to do with forecast and a lot to do, and ultimately is only approved by bylaw. But I did note that when Mr. Dickey came up and you opened that section within your presentation, the image, the icon that was there was a crystal ball with a dollar floating in it. So I thought that was rather poignant and pointed. So this is our crystal ball on what this coming year will be. So I think you're fairly clairvoyant, and your entire team is fairly clairvoyant on that. So thank you very much for that.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen? Sorry.
Yes, please. So I come back to council for any thoughts, any changes, any suggestions. As you've just heard from Mr. Renier, this is there is a recommendation that he'll go over in a moment. But if we wish to make any changes to what's proposed, this is not the last opportunity, but certainly our first opportunity to discuss those. Anything from council? Okay, I'm going to start things off. One of the things that at the very beginning of this presentation, Mr. Silver mentioned was that the unions within our staff services have a 2% increase coming this year. And by tradition and then by decision within our budget process, we have made a decision with regard to the non-union staff. And the policy there is typically the CPI. And our own remuneration policy says that council's remuneration will be increased by the CPI. And as has been noted, the CPI is fairly high this year, with the 2% in the other two categories and the 2% that has been suggested by the CAO and from what he's indicated, supported by the non-union staff. I would ask if council would be willing to take the same measure. In total dollars, it doesn't add up to a lot, but I think in a show of support and synchronicity, I would recommend that the council also take that lower than CPI, the 2% remuneration bump. It's not, since I'm in the chair, I won't make that motion, but I will open it for discussion. First hand I saw was the deputies.
Comment first. I agree 100%. I'm prepared to make a motion when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buderick, I saw your hand as well.
I too agree 100%, and I will definitely second Jim's motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I see Councillor Gordon or Councillor Parks. I can't see if you've got your hand up, Councillor Parks, but anything else on that particular topic? Okay. I'm hearing nothing, so I will come back to the deputy for a motion on that.
So moved that we match the 2% increase as the same as the non-union.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Buderick. Any comments from anyone? Okay. I'm seeing none. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or yell out.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay. Any other comments, changes, amendments? And again, this is not our last chance to do it, but it is our first chance. And I know that that's a lot of information for you to have gone through. And well, we're coming up on what, 3.5 hours now. Okay. Any comments? If not, I will ask Mr. Renier to go through the recommendations that are before us in the agenda and just speak to those.
So is that shared properly?
I think so. I can see it. Can everybody else? I'm seeing nods. Go ahead.
So I'll just go through the budget resolutions, which were included in the staff report. A little different this year since we have separated operating and capital, but these pertain to the operating. So just to make sure, in case anyone has questions on the resolutions or wants to, talk about the wording. So in general, first resolution, just straightforward, 2022 general rate operating budget. We received as follows: township tax levy requirement of 18.625 million, which is a township residential tax rate of 0.0081186. So pretty straightforward, but a lot of decimals. I don't know if there's any questions on that resolution proposed.
Questions, any comments? Seeing none, let's keep going.
The second resolution kind of speaks to the previous resolution at council. So that in accordance with resolution from Committee of the Whole .2021.65, and in keeping overall tax rates at or below 2%, any change in tax policy and or finalized assessment calculations shall be added to or subtracted from the tax rate stabilization reserve. So basically what this resolution is stating is There are estimates. We did get the finalized assessment roll for 2022 from MPAC just this week. It is identical to the one we used for our estimates. So in that sense, we're good. But like we say, the overall tax rate is also impacted by county. We haven't got that indication yet. So what this is saying that is we based our estimate of 1.7 on the county coming in at 2. Let's just say hypothetically they were above that. We have room here to use our reserve funds to maintain what we said we were going to do. And that's what this resolution is saying, that we would do that through reserve funds. So it's not to affect. I don't know if there's any questions on that.
I also see Mr. Silver's come on screen. Mr. Silver, did you have comment? Or do you just happen to be on screen right now?
Yeah, no, I just happen to be on screen supporting Mr. Renier through this.
Okay, thank you. Council, do we have any questions or comments with regard to this section of the resolution? I think it's a pretty standard clause. Sorry, did I cut you off, Mr. Renier?
Well, I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear on it. So when we say at or below the 2%, as in accordance with the previous resolution, so we've obviously proposed the 1.7 overall based on the county estimate. So if the county was high, the thought would be to use the reserve funds to keep the overall at that ceiling of 2. Hopefully we won't get there, but I just want to make sure that's clear, unless council would like us to possibly, if they came in high, to keep it at the 1.7. But I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. That makes sense?
And just if I could recap it in my own words, just to make sure I'm understanding it and everyone else's as well. If, for example, again, this is planned based on a county tax rate of a 2% increase. If the county tax rate increase comes in at 4%, then that would blow over the target from the resolution of 2% in total. And so you would then use the tax rate stabilization reserve to bring it back down to that 2%. And you would end up presenting that to council as, I'll say, the next draft. If county comes in at 1%, then that just makes our 1.7 that much better. It would bring it down to, and again, I'm making up numbers here, but maybe a 1.4 or something like that, if that was the case. So this is your ability to keep doing the calculations based on what the unknown, and when county does come in with its percentage, and the overall target of keeping it below 2%. Is that accurate?
Putting that ceiling on it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is council comfortable with that direction and statement? And making sure that you're understanding it as well, obviously. Okay, Deputy, go ahead.
Yes, I'm okay with that statement. I just wanted to go back to one other statement that was made in the explanation. The statement was made that we did receive our new assessment rolls, and it was in line with the estimates that the township used when they were preparing this document. So that assessment roll that we received, that includes all the new builds and any adjustments that way. It just does not have the new fair market value. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we received our 2022 roll just this week, and that is reflected in the binder in tab 2. So overall, our assessment's up 1.6%. Yeah, so that's all the new houses that came on. But essentially, any existing properties are still valued at the 2016 assessment value, which is what we got to in 2020, and it's been frozen since. So the only way your assessment on an existing property would have changed is if you made a material change to your property, i.e. put an addition on your house or something. Otherwise, you're still at the same assessment.
Thank you for the confirmation.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comments or question on this section of the recommendations? Seeing none, let's move forward.
The next resolution just speaks to the service area. So the service area operating budgets be received as follows: $1,041,700 for transit, $3.9848 million for the Amherst Island Ferry, and just over 11 million there for utilities. So again, that's pretty straightforward, just the proposed operating budgets.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments? Nope. We'll go to number 4.
And so the next resolution just speaks to the actual special area rate. So the 2022 Amherst Youth Transit special area tax rate remained the same as 2021 at 0.000030589. Basically, we're keeping the transit rate flat.
Yeah. And if I could throw in a comment on this, I know there's been some social media chatter about this particular rate in the last few weeks. The special area rate for Amherst Youth Transit has been in place, I believe, since the 80s. Definitely the entire time that I've been on council, the last 21 years. It is not a hidden tax. It has been there and made public every year. It is part of the tax bill. And again, as noted, it remains fixed from last year to this year at the same rate. So a 0% increase on that one. Any other comments? I'm seeing none. Let's move to number 5.
So this is where we get into the notices. So public notice of intention to adopt the 2022 operating budgets be posted on the January 10th, 2022 council agenda and advertised in a local newspaper, social media. So this is basically to say that the first regular council in January will have on there that the notice with intent to adopt.
Thank you. That's a procedural piece.
Yep.
Council, any questions? Okay. Go ahead.
And then just the final resolution as part of this is the 2022 operating budgets as presented be referred to the January 24, 2022 council for adoption. So that's where you would approve the actual operating bylaw.
Thank you. That would be the proposed final opportunity for any amendments, changes, etc. Or if council requires further meetings to have more discussions. But that is the proposal that is before us with all 6 pieces of that recommendation. Council, before I ask for a motion, right, is there any further discussion, ideas, amendments to any element within the presentations and the budget package that we've been provided with tonight? I'm seeing none. We seem to be, I would say at the very least, I think overall council has been expressed to me that we're quite pleased. The staff have brought in a budget at 1.7. It's we know it's been a lot of work, and I have to say kudos to the staff, all senior staff, the finance department staff that have led the charge, and our CAO, of course, for guiding all of them through this process. I think they've done a fantastic job. With that, and if there's no further comments, I will ask for a motion with regard to the recommendations. Anyone? Deputy, go ahead.
Move to receive and adopt the recommendation.
Move to receive and adopt. Do I have a seconder? I'll go with Councillor Gordon. Thank you. All right. Any comments from the mover?
Just that I'm satisfied with it the way it stands, and there's going to be an opportunity for the public to speak again if they give input if they want to with the notifications that go out. We'll be able to assess that before the bylaw comes up for adoption. So I think we need to keep this moving along. And also I'd like to reiterate kudos to senior staff and all staff that are involved in this in some of the locations, such as, and it was a recent one, so it's clear in my memory. The utilities, as you mentioned, where there's been a lot of savings just because staff have taken the initiative to try and find savings and recommend upgrades when they're available and things to be able to save money. That helps overall keep everything at a lower cost for all of us as a taxpayer. So kudos to staff for preparing this and for all the work they do all year to get us to this stage.
Thank you. Seconder, did you have comment? No further comment. Anyone else? Councillor Budrick or Councillor Parks, I guess. Any comments? Seeing none. Okay. I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or call out.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is carried. And with that, at 9:08, I call for a motion to adjourn this committee of the whole. Councillor Budrick, so moved. Seconded by Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Any comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand or call out.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Again, thank you all. It's been a long meeting. I hope that those in attendance or watching on YouTube have gotten great information. I know we have, and we'll continue to work this, and we'll see you all at our next budget meetings, but actually we'll see you all at the next council meeting next Monday.